Right now in Half Sword, you're probably just swinging around aimlessly, trying to hit something. I call this the random flailing technique, and it's what comes natural when you don't understand the situation that you're in or how to interpret it. Winning and losing is going to feel random, and duels will continue to feel random until you understand the 3 core principles of fencing in this video. And the first principle is distance. When facing any form of danger, distance is your biggest ally. Say you're about to get stabbed in the face. Well, you can simply just keep backing up until you're safe. And that pretty much sums it up. So, on to the next principle. Okay, I'm just kidding. In German longsword fencing, distance can be divided into 3 different measures: long, middle, and close. At long measure, both of your weapons can touch, but you can't hit each other until you both take a step forward. And this is where the fight begins. This is where you can observe your opponent and plan your attack. Otherwise, if you don't take advantage of this distance to observe your opponent, you're just rushing into the fight without gathering information about what they're doing. Now, if we take a step forward, we'll be in the middle measure. And this is when you can hit your opponent from where you stand. And we should only enter into this distance when we're sure of our attack. That one step that you have to take before you can hit your opponent from a long measure is what keeps you safe from their counterattacks, as every time you attack, you leave yourself vulnerable. So if you're stepping into middle measure too early, you're not going to have much control over the fight. Then there is close measure, and this is when you've gotten past your opponent's weapon and can lay hands on them. And there's a lot of reasons why you might end up in this situation. First of all, you might have miscalculated your opponent's distance and entered into close. Secondly, you both could have attacked at the same time, resulting in a clinch. And thirdly, you're actively trying to close the distance between you and your opponent because they have a longer weapon like a spear. Now, being able to grapple is a very important part of fencing, and there's a lot of uses in entering into this distance. Like being able to start half swording, or being able to control your opponent's weapon arm with your offhand. Now, of course, getting into this distance safely is easier said than done, which is why we need to take a look at the next principle of fencing: timing. Much like the principle of distance, your attacks can be separated into 3 timings: the before, the instant, and the after, which is a part of every single attack. It goes like this: somebody initializes an attack, and somebody is forced to react to that. The person that started it is in the before, and the person having to react by either parrying or dodging is in the after. Now, the problem with being in the after is that you're forced to defend, and this can allow your opponent to continue to attack you. That moment you needed to parry their attack gives them just enough time to initialize another attack, starting the timing process all over again, allowing them to stay in the before until you do something about it. And this is one reason why you're probably getting killed a lot in Half Sword. The bots love to be the ones to take the before, and if you don't understand this, you're going to be forced into the after without realizing it. And you're not going to know what to do. And that's going to put you at a huge disadvantage. But don't worry, there are ways to take back initiative, like stepping back into long measure. This way your opponent's attack misses you, and you're free to take the before. Or you could use the Vorhangen, which I covered in my previous video. But basically, what this means is that you're parrying in a way that your point is threatening your opponent, which means they must deal with that. There is a third option, and that is by using the third timing in the instant. This is basically countering their attack with your own attack at the same time. This requires very fast reflexes and the ability to read your opponent. But it is very useful because it allows you to take the before since you're acting within their action, and that flips the rhythm. Or if you beat them to the center line, you can just straight up hit them and counter their attack simultaneously, which is what the third principle of fencing is about: control, or more specifically, controlling lines of attack. If you had to summarize what fencing was in a single sentence, it would be a fight for control over the center line. Every fencer has a center line, and it's literally just that. It's an invisible line line that runs down the very center of your body. But why is it so important? Well, let me show you. Okay, so here is our opponent, and here is his center line. Now imagine that his weapon is pointing straight forward, and is pointing right at us. At this point, he's controlling our center line while protecting his own. This also represents the quickest path for their blade to hit us. But we don't like that, so we're going to point our weapon right back at him. So now we're in a position where both of us are contesting the center line, but nobody is dominant. But pay close attention to what happens as I slowly move to the left. The more we move to the left, the more obvious it becomes how much we have changed his line of attack, while still keeping control over the center line, which gives us a very safe and clean line to thrust, while his attack wouldn't even come close to us. But even just a small change in the angle of your attack can mean the difference between getting hit and staying safe. Now, of course, lines of attack are not tied to your center line. They could come from different angles, and this is where guards fit into the picture, such as the Vorhangen, which we talked about earlier, because not only do they allow you to parry and then immediately set up a counterattack, but they also allow you to close off certain lines of attack while maintaining center line control, which is extremely useful. Every action that you do should be used to gain control over the center line, whether it's through your movements and position or through your own attacks. Center line control will make things easier to parry. Instead of having to make large cutting motions, we barely have to move our weapon at all to intercept attacks. This doesn't mean we have to keep sticking our sword straight out in front of us forever, as there's more than one way to control the center line. Shields and armor can also play a big part in this control, as they act like a wall blocking off the center line. But we can get around this by creating our own openings, by cutting around to our opponent's exposed areas, or by waiting for an opening. And remember, it's not even worth attacking an armored area unless you have a blunt force weapon. Okay, let's break down some fights to see if you guys view fencing any differently. In our first match, it's a longsword against longsword, and we're both wearing a pretty good amount of armor. But I do take note that his groin and thigh area is completely unprotected. The first thing I do is close some distance between us, but making sure that I stay at long measure. At this point, I see an opening since his weapon is pointing away from me. So I decide to take it and send a thrust aimed at his groin. And as I do this, he actually moves his arms to intercept my attack, but he ends up going too far, giving me the inside line, and the thrust lands clean while keeping his blade away from me. There was actually a moment that he could have taken the center line and won that encounter. It was during my thrust, so he would have had to counterattack in the instant, but he would have been able to take the center line if he only would have countered my thrust with a thrust. Since my attack actually started on the outside line, he had plenty of room to stab me in the face. In the next duel I have for you guys, my opponent has a one-handed sword and a shield, but he doesn't have a chest plate. So I drop into the guard Albert from long point, fully expecting our opponent to open up his guard, which he immediately does. So without hesitation, I lunge forward and thrust. But to make sure that his sword can't cross the center line, I lower my hilt while keeping the point aimed at his face, and then I finish with a stab. In the next duel, I'm going against somebody with a two-handed warhammer. And of course, the first thing I do is enter into long measure. And this is when my opponent raises his weapon above his head like he's going to throw a downward strike. Now, if I was ready for this would have been the perfect time to attack in the instant with a high thrust. But instead, I step back, raising my sword up, closing off that line of attack. And naturally, the attack fell short since I was at the proper distance. I then wound into the guard plow, giving me center line control, and decide to go for a thrust, which stabs him right in the balls, but that somehow doesn't disable him. So I step back into the guard Nebenhut. This is when he comes at me again with another Oberhau. So I parry and raise my sword up into Oxguard, which is one of the Vorhangen. And from there I cut with a Zornhau, but I'm not close enough, so I miss. Continuing the aggression, I enter into Plowguard and try to land a thrust. But since he has center line control, my attack misses him. Realizing he has a stronger position than me, I step back, making some distance. And as I continue to move to the left, I actually regain center line control, so I go for another thrust, and this time it lands clean.